Welcome once again, football guys. Sean O'Connell, Geoff Schwartz. Happy to be back together after a brief post-Super Bowl hangover hiatus. Geoff, good to see your pretty face.
I know, buddy. I missed you. We were both busy last week. Also, post Super Bowl, you kind of take a little bit of a break, maybe.
Yeah, sure.
But Combine, we're back at it, man. We got the Combine this week right now. Players are in Indianapolis right now. So we'll talk about, it's one of my favorite things to talk about, Sean, because I think people do not understand the purpose of the Combine. Even though they get told about it over and over again, all we're going to see is the athletic testing that's on television now, which is on prime time, like Saturday and Sunday. It's like 1 o'clock. 5 o'clock, which it used to just never be that way. It just was on when it was on. And we'll talk about that. And two, I mean, look, as we approach draft season, we covered Caleb Williams for 2 straight years at USC. We have great insight on Caleb Williams as we approach draft season. What do the Bears do? There was rumors last night that Fields might have been traded already. So a lot to get into. And we'll end, Sean, with your trip to Saudi Arabia. You were able to go over and call some fights. PFL took it on the chin a little bit, though. I saw the standings, but I was a little bummed that PFL didn't show out as they should.
We'll get to that, but not as surprising as I wish it was because of the way that some of the matchups ended up playing out. But in any case, main event PFL won. That's what really matters. Let's talk about the Combine, though. Yes. Let's talk about this because it is my favorite non-competition sporting event, right? I mean, you got the draft, you got the Combine, you got the NBA draft lottery, you've got all-star games.
Yep.
I really enjoy the oddities, the peculiarities of Combine and Combine discussion. It's just an absolute blast to tune into the Underwear Olympics and see all of these guys that either played in the league or have been personnel evaluators in the league, GMs, coaches, things like that, to see them weigh in. We see the best versions of some guys. David Shaw at Combine time is like his best self. Mike Mayock, who, has obviously spent time now with the Raiders. It's fun. I love it. And I like playing the guessing game that everyone else plays when they're evaluating draft talent.
Dude, the draft process to me, now that I've been through it, but now that I get to cover it, I love this time. I tweeted this out earlier. I read every mock draft. If I see one in my X timeline, Twitter timeline, boom, clicking. I don't care who it's from. I read scouting reports. I listen to podcasts about draft prospects, Sean. I love all of it, even though, again, like I've watched these guys, you've watched these guys. I love hearing different opinions about players that are not the same as mine. Me and you can watch the same film and have a different opinion. Now, there's people out there that are just purposely trying to get engagement, and those people, ignore those people, right? Like, it's okay to have a different opinion on a player, but to have something that's so vastly different than everyone else just to get engagement, that you're not smarter than everyone else, right? Like, you can say, and look, there are plenty of people that are like Caleb Williams. We saw Merrill Hodge, who's been right about a lot of quarterbacks, say, like, you know what? I don't think he's special. Now, special to Merrill Hodge is different than special for me and you. We'll get into Caleb Williams in a second, but that's, to me, the fun part about this process. And with the Combine coming up, we're going to see athletic testing numbers, and we're going to accelerate that hype for certain players and down for other players. But the Combine's purpose is not the athletic testing. Every player wears a GPS unit now when they work out in college football and the NFL, by the way. They're in the pads as they play, Sean. All the teams know the speeds of the players. They know how fast these guys are already moving. The Combine, for the physical athletic part of it, is do they pass the eye test, right? So, for example, Geoff Schwartz, I was slow. Now, when I played, we didn't have GPS units. Just had to watch the film, right, and watch binoculars on me. Geoff Schwartz is slow. Guess what? I ran a slow 40 time at the Combine. I didn't jump. I know, right? Shocking. I didn't jump very high. Okay, well, check the box. Geoff Schwartz, not very athletic. They knew that already, right? But if I came out and ran a 5 flat 40, they'd have to go like, holy heck, why does Geoff Schwartz not play that fast on the field?
Yeah.
That's what it's about, cross-checking what you see on film. There are going to be guys that run faster than you think and guys that run slower than you think. And you have to figure out as a scout why that is. Puka Nacua is a great example of part of the scouting kind of process, right? He was drafted, I think, the 5th round, right, by the Rams last year, had an incredible season. There's a fun clip of Sean McVay and Les Snead, the general manager for the Rams and head coach McVay, talking about drafting Puka Nacua. And they said, he didn't test very well, but he catches every pass and he runs away from defenders. So in the end, you have to weigh, right, like the testing results to the film. So the physical part of this that's the purpose for it. So when you're watching that, think about that, right? Like even if you're just a casual fan, like, okay, that guy runs fast, but does he play that fast? That guy runs slow, does he play that slow? That's what the athletic part of the combine's about.
And of course, there's the medical testing where you'll see guys who've had incredible college careers, maybe even guys who run and jump and lift well, but there's something when they do the medical testing that makes teams balk a little bit or that people get a little bit scared of. And then the interviews, I was listening to Daniel Jeremiah today. I'm a big fan of DJ and how he evaluates about how, like the interview process, even that is a little bit misunderstood, where you're not really convincing teams. You're not really talking people in to drafting you in most cases. It's confirming biases or exposing red flags within yourself, right? I mean, that's what teams are trying to do with some of those questions. And even though some of those questions have been filtered out, some like the shocking, let's put this guy on the spot and say something bad about his mom, like that's been filtered out. It's been filtered out of the process. But still, you sit down. It's a risky endeavor in a lot of ways for like non-sure thing players to engage in the scouting combine, but nonetheless, one of the most fascinating things we have in sports. And by the way, something that we don't embrace the NBA scouting combine the same way, even though they do very similar things. Major League Baseball scouting is not publicized and packaged in the same way. My PFL, the company I work for in the fight world, we were brainstorming, Geoff, and we put these ideas together. We packaged this thing, wanted to do an MMA scouting combine.
That'd be fun.
And they asked me, I consulted on like, what would you do? What's a good thing to test? And it never came to fruition. Maybe someday it will, but it hasn't come to fruition at this point because like, how do you test certain things? Obviously you can line up the accelerometers. You can have guys punch a bag and see how hard they punch. You can see how many like punches they can throw in a 30-second span. But the same way that these things don't translate directly to how good are you at football. It's like that in every sport. And it's just fascinating that the NFL seems to have really they've been most successful in making it feel for fans like, I see what Jeff Schwartz's 10-yard split is. I see what his 40 is. I see what his broad jump is. I see how many times he benches 225. And I, the fan, now feel like I can glean some information and project how he's going to be. And I think that's why it's such a successful thing.
But I also think they're easy workouts to consume as a viewer. A 40 time, you run a straight line, right? A bench press, not everyone lifts, but enough people work out. They know what 225 can feel like. And so I think it's easy to adjust. Plus, again, you get to watch these guys run the 40 time when they're actually on the field. So I think in people's minds, when you said PFL, I pictured Rocky IV. Just like Drago, like just continually punching something, running in, like getting measured. Now Rocky obviously wasn't doing any of that as an old school.
He was in that barn in Siberia.
Look, the medical part of this is interesting too, Sean. So what happens for the medical part is there's 6 different rooms, let's say, and players go into every room, and in each room there's 5 doctors from each team or 6 doctors from each team. And they go up and down your body. They feel every part of your body. I remember I had in one room, a doctor sort of moved my knee and was like, "Did you hurt your MCL?" It was 4 years. Freshman season, MCL, missed 1 game, came back. They can sort of feel everything, right? And then send you for MRIs and other testing. And that's where the combine started. It was a place to get medical testing done where everyone's there, right? Because of course, if you're going to invest $1 million into a player, you want to know whether or not they're healthy. Even guys, and we'll talk about Penix in a second, guys that have been hurt and then play healthy for a couple of years, there's still concerns about injuries because injuries, and look, I was a guy who was injured all the time, Sean. It sucks being tagged as injury prone because a lot of times that's not your fault, right? But there's some truth to that. And this is where you can pair up sometimes the physical testing to the medicals. There are numbers like the short shuttle, right? So you're in the middle, you're at the 5, you run to the 10, you run back to the goal line, run to the 5, the 20-yard shuttle, okay, 5, 10, 5. But Sean, a lot of times for offensive linemen, for example, if you're under a certain number, your career length is super long because it translates to basically, can you move? Are you flexible? do you have flexible tendons? Because the way the drill is run, those guys stay healthier. My shuttle time, believe it or not, was very slow. Shocking, right? And I was hurt all the time. Like, it's just, so there are some things that go from the physical to the medical that I think teams take away from the combine.
But you did, I mean, I consider a short NFL career to be like 3 years.
I played 8 years. Yeah.
You had 8 years, right? So it's like,
I had 6 surgeries, but yeah, it was.
there's some guys who play 15 and they're
Sure.
the incredible outliers.
Yeah.
But in any case, yeah, look, the whole process is fascinating. Can we start getting into the players? All right. I want to, is there any
the one last thing that I think is the oddest part of the combine, especially now in 2024 with our sort of climate, is the weigh-in process. Because you are in your tights, you walk in front of 100 scouts sitting in stands. They have a notebook out, and they're like, all right, Geoff Schwartz, 6'6", 331. His hands are 10 inches. His arms are 34. Oh, and then you squat while you're in your tights to see kind of hip, ankle mobility.
Decent bulge. All right, we're good.
And so that is the only thing you do not measure of your entire body, that part. Everything else is measured. You do a Cybex test, so you test your leg strength early on, and it's just awkward. I'm just kind of surprised they still do that nowadays. But yes, let's get to some players that we covered, or anyone else. I mean, I've watched a lot of guys so far.
Yeah, well, I want to talk about Caleb Williams, because Caleb Williams, I think, is one of the more polarizing prospects at the very top of this draft because of, what we saw from him. At Oklahoma, successful, kind of like on trajectory of what his recruiting picture said he was going to be. Paired with Lincoln Riley, no surprise there. And then, of course, his first year at USC, more incredible success. And those dynamic plays and the Patrick Mahomes comparisons and a Heisman Trophy. And then this past season is, I think, where a lot of this conversation comes into play, because for whatever reason, it didn't work out quite as well, even though USC had added a bunch of talent on both sides of the ball. The coaching picture obviously was convoluted, and Alex Grinch was retained for the season and then fired later on. But at the end of the day, they were not the winners that they were supposed to be, USC as a collective team. And Caleb Williams bore the brunt of blame because he's the quarterback who was given a ton of the credit when they were so successful the year previous, when they were an 11-win team. Now, a 10-win team. Now, that by itself, Caleb Williams playing well, having good numbers, but maybe not as good as Michael Penix, who was in his own league, not as good as Bo Nix, who was in his own league. That's going to contribute to the conversation about Caleb Williams. But also, as we highlighted the interview process, there were things that Caleb Williams did behaviorally this past season that I think, if I'm an NFL GM, if I'm an NFL scout, even if I'm an NFL fan, and I know my team's up there at the top of the draft, I'm looking at some of like the Caleb Williams highlights and lowlights and saying, is that a guy I want to mortgage the future of my franchise on? And that's what I really want to talk about here.
All right. So it's a fun discussion with Caleb Williams, because I'm going to say this, I think, throughout the discussion about prospects, whenever we talk about this, Sean, is the importance of watching the tape, right? And understanding the reasons for the numbers. I think, look, I love advanced stats. I use them. We talk about them. I love them. But you also have to give a reason for the stat, right? You can't just say, well, so we'll get to Bo Nix in a second. Well, so-and-so, like Caleb Williams, for example, his time to throw is like 3.5. That's extremely high. A lot of times that's a red flag for any quarterback. But you have to watch the film and see, why is that, right? So you mentioned some of the issues that USC's offense had. The main thing, Sean, is USC's offense stunk. It was not good offense this season. Yes, they put up a ton of points, but the general things you look at for a good offense, just a rhythm, right? Like, is there a rhythm to the play calling? USC had none of that. Is the offensive line any good? No. Is the quarterback kind of sort of understanding the point of the plays? And this is not a knock at Caleb Williams. This is, to me, more a knock on the scheme. The answer was no, right? No. And you have to dig into why that is. And part of that, I think, is because, as you mentioned, the defense was so bad. I think I saw the stat this week that USC or Caleb was 12-0 when they allowed less than like 35 points in a game. I mean, like they just, it's hard for him. So, I think when you look at what Caleb Williams does well, a lot of that long time to throw, Sean, wasn't about him scrambling to scramble. It's that no one was open. And the scheme got nobody open, or the wide receivers weren't as good as him. And Caleb Williams was buying time to eventually make the throw he had to make. When Caleb Williams was asked to just get the ball, take a step or two, and throw, money, dude. And I think too, when I'm an Oregon fan, you're a Utah fan. We both played USC as fans this year. Every time he took a snap, I was terrified because of the things he could do on the football field. That to me is a great example of sort of like throw out time to throw out some of the bad stuff. He can make plays that other quarterbacks in this draft cannot make. His arm talent is immense. His accuracy on the run, his accuracy just anytime yes, he made mistakes, but to me, you can excuse some of those mistakes because of the urgency that he had on offense to do everything for this team at all times. Look, and I do think there are some like legit concerns about, I know Merrill Hodge, one of those guys where he's like, he's not special in the pocket. I agree with you. He is not, last season, he was not quote unquote special in the traditional sense of like, catch the football, I look here, ball's gone. That's not what the offense was, but that wasn't his fault, right? Like there are times you watch a quarterback and you're like, well, no, it's his fault. He didn't make the right read, or he didn't get rid of the ball. To me, I watch that offense and think it's sort of everyone's fault per se, including Williams at times, but also the play calling, the offensive line, the wide receivers. And then lastly, I've said this all season. I'm very glad sort of the national media now is finally talking about their offense. I felt like I was on an island for a long time. The USC offense was shockingly bad last season for the pedigree of Lincoln Riley.
And that's part of the reason why there were coaching changes made this offseason. And we'll evaluate USC as they move into the Big Ten moving forward. But this is a combine discussion. This is a Caleb Williams discussion. So, look, you and I think we're equally impressed with his abilities on a football field.
Yeah.
Right? The physicality. He's not like the largest guy. Unbelievable lower body strength, right? So where he will shuck and shed and kind of wiggle his way out of secure tackles, out of sacks, because he's got the instinct for it, but also he's a physically strong guy by all accounts, a hard weight room worker. And I don't think that when you call into question anything about Caleb Williams, if you're calling things into question, I don't think his physical abilities really even that's not even part of the narrative. Now, there were some things that, again, if you're being drafted where Caleb Williams is expected to be drafted, we'll just say top 5 for the purpose of the discussion. If you're a top 5 pick at the quarterback position in the NFL, you're supposed to be the face of a franchise, right? And he has been the face of a franchise for 2 years in Los Angeles, all right? And I thought that a couple of seasons ago when he arrived as a transfer, he was handling that with as much grace and aplomb as you can expect from a guy who's 20 years old, right?
Agreed. Spreading
the wealth with his name, image, and likeness money, kind of doing that thing. We saw, though, a little bit of that confidence turn to arrogance, or a little bit of that confidence kind of falter, or whatever it was, as last season progressed. And then, of course, this past season, and that's where maybe the interview process becomes more important. Maybe that's where your priorities as a franchise become a little bit more important. Your view of what it means that he was refusing to speak to the media at certain times, your interpretation of, the trash talk that didn't work out for him and his reaction to it, like whether or not that's important to you as a GM, whether or not that's important to you when you're talking about the face of your franchise. And I think there's a lot of teams who'll just be like, no, we're not worried about that because we're going to get him here. We're going to sit him down for one discussion, and we're going to say, hey, you're with the Bears now, dude. You can't paint your fingernails. And you're certainly not going to say F the other franchise. That's it. Done. And he'll probably be like, okay, yeah, you're paying me $100 million. Cool. I'm not doing that. So I don't know how it's going to be handled, but there are some guys that come out of college, and what they have done is they've played well on the field, and they've also handled everything right off the field, even with the cameras on them, the spotlight so close. Caleb Williams, for 75% of his college career, I think he was that guy. And then when his team started to lose and the frustration started to show itself, I don't know if he handled it as well as an NFL team needs you to handle it.
Well, I think that's a fair question because, you're going to have adversity in the NFL, and, he did not have adversity really at Oklahoma. He did have adversity his first year at USC, and last year he did have a ton of adversity. But I could also make the case, Sean, to counter that he's just 21 years old, man. And it was last year was a tough year, right? USC was coming off an 11-2 season, or was it 10-3? 11-2, right? They lost to 11-3. They lost Utah twice, and they lost to Tulane.
Lost to Tulane in the
so 11-3. They're supposed to be a playoff team, and he's like, I'm doing my part, and my coaching staff is not doing their part on defense. Like I can understand the frustration he had there. Look, when you score 42 points at home against a Washington, that's a game you should win, and I understand the emotions of going up in the crowd and just being emotionally spent from not being able to get over the hump with Washington. But I thought all season long, he continued to play hard. It did not affect his week-to-week preparation. But it's fair questions to ask. Hey, man, like, why do we see you? You waver a little bit. I do think too, Sean. We have never heard anything from anyone about like negative that played with him, like any sort of teammate, any sort of coach. And so I think that bodes well for him. That just nothing. And you're right. He had to navigate Damian Jalaitis in Los Angeles, the first really big athlete to do that, because UCLA obviously is not in the same boat as USC. And he handled it great. There were no issues, no problems. So I think as a leader, he'll check out fine for these NFL teams.
So I think if you're looking at the surface level of things and what testing he does engage in, if any, at the combine this week, he's going to look great. We don't know about any nagging injuries that he's been keeping secret for his entire college career.
Yeah,
I mean, I kind of attributed a lot of Caleb Williams's so-called issues with the media or whatever as like, dude's just a competitor, all right? Yeah. And he's frustrated, and that's fine. I was impressed with him when we got a chance to talk to him on the rare occasions that we did. Yeah. And like you said, 21 years old, you're going to learn these things. And also, I really do believe this in the NFL. There are teams that need you to be Tom Brady. They need you to be Peyton Manning. They need you to be a guy that they can package and sell to the white suburban mom, and that's the only way they're going to invest in you. I think those teams are fewer and further between than they used to be, and I think there are plenty of teams now that know that Caleb Williams, when you look at the, again, issues, if you want to call them issues, they are things that are very easily handled. Yeah. They are things that are very easily put to bed, or they're things that you can smooth over with a little bit of coaching, a little bit of media coaching, and maybe just a little bit of saying like, hey, Caleb, like you're coming across as kind of arrogant. Here, we don't want that to be your perception. All right?
Yeah.
So you're going to go to the Humane Society and you're going to hang out with some puppies, and we're going to fix that image. All right?
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that goes away. And that means for me, if I'm drafting at the top, I'm saying, yeah, I want Caleb Williams, because the potential, the upside of what this guy is capable of and what we saw him do on the field, even when the adversity hit, again, in play, even when he was being pressured, even when his offensive line let that free rusher come.
Yeah.
Like he did some things that, well, like you didn't see Brock Purdy do in a Super Bowl. So I want Caleb Williams if I'm drafting high.
I think there's no doubt he's the first overall pick, but no doubt about it. And so I just, to me, it's a matter of like, is it the Bears or is it the Commanders trading up for him? Like, I think that's just what it'll end up being. One of those two teams, he'll go number one, and I think he'll be very good. Now, of course, every quarterback needs a support staff around them in the NFL to succeed, right? You can't go anywhere and just, to a bad organization with bad coaching and typically be good. So he'll need things around him to be up to par. But I just think he's the easy, clear-cut number one pick, Sean, and he makes throws that other guys don't make in this class. People will compare him to Patrick Mahomes light. I think there's a lot of that in his game, considering his offense he played in and his defense he had with him. Very much like a Texas Tech situation, which is crazy for someone to say that about USC. But that's where we're at with Williams. You want to get to the other two Pac-12 quarterbacks before we branch off into your Saudi Arabia trip?
I do. I actually think so. There's there's the top tiers of quarterbacks, right? Every draft class, you've got your guys who you know are going to be first round picks, and then we'll see what happens with these guys. Caleb Williams is firmly entrenched in that top 10 category, unless we hear something insane or, you get a Laramie Tunsil situation or whatever. And I don't expect any of that. And then I think that a couple of guys that fall into either lower tier 1 or more likely tier 2 for most teams are Bo Nix and Michael Penix Jr., who both had unbelievable years and really unbelievable careers post-transfer when they came into the Pac-12. Obviously, Nix from Auburn and Michael Penix Jr. after his injury-prone times at the University of Indiana. He shows up in Seattle and ends up being the best player in college football.
Yeah. Man, these guys are going to be linked forever because of the schools they played at. But I think there's almost wildly different pro prospects, Sean. Bo Nix and Michael Penix, just like I mentioned with Williams, though, but I think even more are guys that people tell themselves that they haven't watched the film of both these guys. Bo Nix, so the argument with Bo Nix is that, his ADOT, right? His average depth of target is like 4, which is very low for a college quarterback, right? Michael Penix is like 11. But you watch him play, especially Bo Nix, and you watch games of him play, and you never notice it. You never notice it because he makes all the throws. He makes intermediate throws. He makes deep throws. I saw there's a chart out about he throws the least amount of intermediate throws, 10 to 19 yards of any of the top 6 draft prospects. But it's like 2 less than McCarthy and 3 less than Jaden Daniels. It's not that much, right? And he was obviously sat a bunch of fourth quarters this season because they were winning. And to me, when you talk about Nix and you say things like, he threw a lot of screens, you sort of devalue the things that I think are actually concerns of Bo Nix, and you elevate things that do not matter to NFL teams. NFL teams are not like, you know what, A. too low, Sean. I can't draft the guy. Like, no, there's reasons you wouldn't draft him, but not because he threw screens at Oregon, because he ran the offense that he was in. Versus Michael Penix, I think people look at him and say, wow, look at all those 50-50 balls. Look at all those go routes. Look at all those deep post and corner routes. And then you're like, he throws the ball deep. He must do the NFL. And you're like, well, there's a big hole in his game between both hash marks, And Bo Nix obviously has his own issues. So to me, these guys are linked because you got to watch the film to dig in on these guys. You really have got to watch it. They play in the same conference. They played each other. But to me, they're far different prospects. So, to me, Bo Nix, the concerns are, I think he's a little robotic in the offense. And depends on where you put him at in the NFL, whether that matters or not. But he can be robotic, right? Like, this is where the ball's supposed to go. Crap, it's covered. What do I do now, right? And he's very good pre-style. He's played 61 college games. And Oregon's offense, by the way, is very pro-style in the passing attack. Pro-style, a lot of times West Coast offense, you form a triangle. So if you look at around what Oregon did, there's always a triangle like of wide receivers. You sort of read one defender goes here, you hit that guy. You hit that guy. If you watch the passing attack, a lot of that is sort of a triangle. I think sometimes against pressure, he's not great. His footwork tends to kind of flutter a little bit. He comes out the back of the pocket too much, but he's actually throws the ball well under pressure. So it's kind of both things you got to kind of watch again. He's very good on the move, which is something NFL teams like. His pressure to sack rate is very low. When teams pressure him, the ball tends to be out. And then he missed a lot of deep passes last year, Sean. They were just inaccurate deep balls. I was kind of surprised by that. So those are the actual knocks on Nix. Not that he threw too many screen passes last season.
And again, if you're a team and you're evaluating what you want to do with this quarterback, you're a team that feels like I need someone who's a gunslinger. I need someone who's going to be able to hit those deep balls no matter what. My personnel dictates that I have X, Y, and Z who I believe can win their one-on-one matchups that are going to be open, 40 yards down the field on a regular basis. Maybe Bo Nix is not your guy. Maybe Michael Penix Jr. in that case is, because you've seen more of that when he had these elite receivers at the University of Washington. And a couple of times, right, we saw Michael Penix Jr. in a semifinal game putting balls in a place where, I could have caught it. His receivers, who were elite, could not lose because of where the ball was, because of how just on point his throws were. in a semifinal matchup. And then the opposite was kind of true in a national championship game. And I know you're watching the film and you're taking it as a whole, and you're not going probably, well, I like him in this game, I don't like him in this game. But I think that you could make some inferences about how he handles pressure, how he handles not pass rush pressure, but pressure in like certain situations. And you're probably going to ask him about that in an interview. But the reason that these two intrigue me in a lot of ways even more than Caleb Williams does is Caleb Williams is going to end up going to a franchise that's struggling.
Yeah.
He's going to end up going to a place where there's not been a lot of recent success, hasn't been a history of winning in the 2020s. All right. And both Michael Penix Jr. and Bo Nix have an opportunity to end up in a situation. Caleb Williams is going to be given the Patrick Mahomes comparison, as unfair as that is, because they look like one another when they're on the field. But when you talk about situational draft situation comparables here, it's more likely that you see Penix or Nix in a Patrick Mahomes situation where they get drafted by a place that has a well-established coach, that has an established starter that they can sit behind and learn from and adjust to the NFL game for a year or two. Those two guys are far more likely to end up in a situation that, for me, lends itself to long-term success in the NFL. We've seen it too many times now where some of the great quarterbacks and even the rising young quarterbacks were given that opportunity, right? Everyone's real high on Jordan Love right now. That was Jordan Love's future. That was Patrick Mahomes' situation. And I like that for both Nix and for Penix. I'm sure it would be better to have the $35 million signing bonus in some ways, but whose career do you want, right? At the end of the day, longevity and the opportunity to be with a winning franchise is something that I could probably give back $10 or $20 million on the signing bonus if it meant that I was going to make an extra 100 on the back end and maybe win a Super Bowl.
It's a good point, because you look at and maybe where the teams are sort of mocked to draft Nix and Penix. It's, the Vikings, the Broncos, the Seahawks, places that have won for some time. Maybe Tampa Bay wants to sign Baker for 2 years and draft a young quarterback. Atlanta possibly, which has a good situation. They have some skill guys there you want to work with. So yeah, I know you're right about that. The thing with Penix, man, there just was like a lot of not great. That's the wrong word to put it. There was great, like the Texas game. I'll put it like this. Think of CJ Stroud. Okay, different quarterbacks, but same sort of idea. Where you watched him play a certain way, and then against Georgia, he played the completely different way, and you thought to yourself, okay, are we getting Georgia CJ Stroud or sort of the rest of CJ Stroud? When Michael Penix played against Texas, I thought the same thing. Because he's not a guy this year that did a lot of escaping the pocket, move around the pocket, and throwing the ball down the field. And when he was pressured a lot of time, it was inaccurate, off his back foot. He didn't look as comfortable, right? And so when that game happened, Sean was like, oh, are we having a Stroud situation here? But then the Michigan game sort of went back to the point I've made about him, which is that, like, I think when things are muddied around him, we get a much different quarterback. It is not as accurate. He's sort of, getting the ball out quicker, but again, not to the right places. When he's given the time to step into a throw, it's really good. You have to question, and this is a fair question. He will play with a quote unquote worse offensive line and worse wide receiver core in the NFL. The Washington offensive line last year won the Joe Moore Award. He was touched a total of 7 times all season, and he threw to 3 NFL wideouts. And Rome Odunze, I think, should be wide receiver 1. I don't know why he's not for a lot of people. And I think these are questions for Michael Penix when you head in the NFL. We're like, okay, now go to the Vikings. They've traded Justin Jefferson. Like, who you throwing to, And I think also to the middle of the field, he's never through the middle of the field. Like, there's legit questions about some of those throws. It's not part of what they did in offense. So I think that's why Penix is lower than Nix. I've been told there's grades for Penix all the way from round 1 to round 4. I feel like Nix is probably a second round grade for most people. They might take him in the first round because it's quarterback, and that's what you sort of do at times. But Penix is a wide range of thoughts, man. First round to fourth round.
Bo Nix is going to be drafted by the Dallas Cowboys
Oh,
because he is exactly what Jerry Jones wants. He just wants a guy who is, I mean, when you talk to Bo Nix, he's just making eye contact, shaking your hand,
he's a very
perfect
professional.
haircut, square jaw, wearing the suit jacket. You put Bo Nix in like a black and white photo, and he might as well be Bart Starr. Like Bo Nix is going to get drafted. He's the guy that belongs as the face of one of like these storied franchises in the NFL, like that have that image, right? That have that clean cut image. That's Bo Nix. All right.
I can see that. Yeah.
If you're more of a shoot from the hip type franchise, if you're someone who's got a little bit more of that Baltimore Ravens in you, the Pittsburgh Steelers kind of like chip on the shoulder, that kind of thing, maybe not. Maybe not Bo Nix. Maybe he's not your guy. But if you're the Dallas Cowboys, the Indianapolis Colts, the New England Patriots, the Denver Broncos, that's your guy. That's Bo Nix. All right.
I could see Sean Payne loving Bo Nix. Like he's 24, married. I don't think he has a kid yet. I could see him being close to having children by now. Like I could see that being something that Sean Payne, just the way his play style, the ball's out quick, a lot of empty protection in Oregon, find the the right matchup. His pre-snap is really good as Bo Nix. He moves well too. He's a better mover than Michael Penix, as if we're sort of comparing those two guys. So yeah, those are the three Pac-12. We watch a lot of Pac-12 football, man, with these guys over the years. I'm curious sort of where they end up. I think obviously Williams goes one. I would imagine one of the two, Nix or Penix, probably go at the end of the first round. The other one goes early in the second round.
So before we move on, my last thing on the draft and the scouting combine. You just mentioned Rome Odunze. I think that he should be wide receiver one as well. So impressed with that guy. I also believe he's going to test incredibly well at the combine. The highest drafted non-quarterback from the Pac-12 conference, the now deceased Pac-12 conference. Rome Odunze has a chance to be that guy. Leatu Latu has a chance to be that guy. Who's it going to be?
I think it'd be Rome Odunze. I mean, look, okay, obviously the draft can vary wildly, but you look at like 1, 2, 3, and New England's a wild card. They could trade out of 3, but that person's probably trading out for Jaden Daniels, right? So that's 1, 2, 3, or Drake May, either or. 4, the Cardinals sit there right now, probably go wide receiver. 5 is the Chargers. They could go offensive tackle, wide receiver, Brock Bowers. The Giants, I would take a wide receiver if Jaden Daniels is not there. And so that, that's, I just don't think Latu is going to go. I mean, 8 with the Falcons is the first, I think, chance that someone might go defense in this draft. And then even that, after that, 9 and 10 can easily go with look, if the Bears end the draft, Sean, with Caleb Williams and Rome Odunze at 9, they've hit a grand slam A+ draft. They would have traded the number 1 pick last year for Caleb Williams, Rome Odunze, and DJ Moore. That's a home run, man. They have won that trade.
Keep your eye on the TV this weekend. Hopefully we get some crazy numbers. Even though the 40-yard dash is in some ways de-emphasized in terms of its importance because of what you're talking about, the GPS units and the tracking and the 10-yard split and all that kind of thing. I want to see someone run like that 4.140. I still just want to see it. I still want to see someone with the 52 reps on the bench. These guys that are just freaks. I really enjoy watching the Vernon Davis performances where you're like, how does a human being that size move that fast? It's one of the great things about the NFL Combine.
It is. It's a lot. It's a lot of fun watching these freak shows. It just
I don't know if Jay Glazer still does this. There was a time when Glazer would kind of serve 2 duties down at the combine. He would talk to some of these dudes who tested well, but were from who knows what school or had issues that he knew that the NFL wasn't necessarily going to be a long-term thing. And at the combine, they would start recruiting them to be fighters, to be boxers specifically. I don't know if they still do it.
Yeah, I don't know.
If the NFL has really allowed that to continue, but that is another interesting thing about the NFL draft combine is that you look at some of these bodies and the just raw, freakish athleticism possessed by some guys who, were outside linebackers who never really learned football, or wide receivers who are just like, I'm just doing this because I'm good at it. Like, you can put those guys in a sport with a steeper learning curve, or I should say a shorter learning curve, and maybe that's not as fleshed out from a talent pool standpoint, like MMA, like boxing, and things can happen. So that brings us to my trip to Saudi Arabia. What do you want to know? It was
okay. So
a wild night.
I saw you post a picture with a camel. I think I've sent you the video before, but the hardest I've ever laughed in my life is riding a camel in Israel. It was like the best. It was the funniest thing. The funniest part about it, Sean, was that I was with my brother and his wife and Meredith and me and a bunch of other. It was an NFL athlete trip. They wouldn't let me on the camel with Meredith, but they put my brother's wife on the camel with me. So it's me and Brooke and not Meredith for some odd reason. They made her go on a different camel. And so I'm just like, dude, I am laughing. So it was the funnest thing. It was so much fun. Did you get to ride the camel?
Yeah, got to ride the camel.
Oh, it's the best. They're on their knees. Okay, they're like on the knees. You hop up, and it's like a car on hydraulics. It's like boop boop boop. They like hop up in stages.
Yeah,
you hop up, and then you're just on this fucking camel in the middle of the desert. It's the best.
And they're so tall.
Yes.
It's not like riding a horse. It's like you're twice as high up there.
It's the best. I love it so much.
Every once in a while, they kind of like look back, they make that crazy like noise. They're just like they're wild animals, man. They're so crazy. I also ate a camel while I was there.
And
delicious.
Fat content good?
Delicious.
Like a camel steak, a burger?
It was more like a camel pot roast over like saffron
over
rice.
Yeah.
It was good, man. It was
really,
really delicious. Yeah.
So I love asking this question to people that have experiences like you did. What did you expect versus like what was it?
Yeah. So I didn't really know super what to expect. The PFL does a great job where they call them user guides. They send a packet out when we're going to a new place, like a country. Yeah. Like, hey, make sure you have this. Tipping is not really expected here in this country, or tipping is expected. Like your cell phone might not work here. They do a great job of preparing everyone. And I guess for obvious reasons, they felt like it was necessary when everyone was going to be arriving in Saudi Arabia to be like, look, this really is a very different culture than what most of you are coming from. A lot of the fighters, Brazilian, a lot of the fighters, obviously American, some fighters from Russia on this. And it was like, hey, like it's a different place. Even as men, you're not supposed to wear shorts. You're not supposed to like walk around without a shirt on, even at like the pool and stuff. You're not supposed to curse in your post-fight interview because it can be considered incredibly offensive. Like it's a modernizing country, but it's a very, very conservative country. And so I was going based off of some of that. And one of my friends actually did an expat contract and worked there for like 8 years. And I was melding what I was reading with what he was saying to me, just like, like you got to just read the room where you are. If it's a place where there's a lot of people who are like from your parents' generation, the older generation, they're having a hard time accepting these new policies.
Yep.
If it's people that are your age or younger, they're really excited about the fact that Saudi Arabia is kind of coming out of their isolation from the world and the hardcore Islamic law and things like that. So I didn't really know what to expect. My wife was like, hey, be really careful over there. But where we were staying ended up being like, it's a beautiful hotel. It was in a neighborhood where, you kind of had to walk around the corner, but there were just tea shop after coffee shop after like little cafe.
Yep.
And it was great, man. It was like the people were very welcoming and nice. It was wonderful. A guy that you want to talk about how small the world can feel sometimes, Geoff. I used to do local radio in Salt Lake City, as you know.
Yeah.
Worked for the ESPN station in Salt Lake City. There were 5 radio stations in that group. One of them was a hip hop station, and JR the Superstar was our morning hip hop DJ.
What a great name!
And just a really cool guy. Got to know him from working, and we've stayed in touch over the years. He is now a radio DJ in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia.
No way.
So we met up, and he's like, you got to come try this place. It's owned by some guy. I'd have to look through my text messages, but effectively he was a guy who used to like an opening act for like Tupac back in the old school hip hop days. Now owns this place. Anyway, so it's called Smoky Beards. This is something that I know you love about traveling, where you just discover unbelievable cuisine.
Yes.
I didn't know what it was. I just trusted him. I'm like, okay, I'll meet you at Smoky Beards. We show up, and it is Texas barbecue.
No way. With cow or camel?
No, with cow. They don't eat pork there, but they do
pork,
eat.
Yes.
But they do eat beef. Everything's beef. It was on par with like the best Texas barbecue I've had in Texas. I had a big, enormous beef rib and slices of brisket, pickles. It was, Geoff, if you had been eating this in Austin or San Antonio or Dallas or whatever, you'd have been like, wow, this is really, really good barbecue. It was in the middle of Saudi Arabia, made by Filipino guys. The entire restaurant was staffed with Filipino dudes. And I was just like, how do you guys know how to make this? And they were just kind of shrugging, just like, yeah, I don't know. It was so good. It was incredible. So I guess that's a long way of answering. I didn't really super know what to expect, but it was great. It was great. The food was great. The people were really nice. The atmosphere at the fights ended up being a little bit meh, because turns out that our sold out show was actually the Crown Prince had bought all the tickets and handed them out. And so people didn't really know.
Wait, really?
Yeah, I guess that's how it worked. So
wow,
it was wild. So there's these like super high stakes fights happening. And like at times people were just like getting up to go have concessions. And I'm just like, that's like the number 10 welterweight in the world versus like a 2-time PFL champion. And you guys aren't even paying attention, but whatever. It's the sport is emerging in that region, in that country. So it was wild, but it was a cool time.
Did you like the format, the PFL versus Bellator?
I did. I didn't like, as you alluded to at the beginning of the show. So there were 6 matchups where it was a PFL fighter versus a Bellator fighter, and officially on the night, Bellator went 5-1.
Yeah.
Now there were a couple of last second changes in the fight card where the PFL guy got hurt and dropped off, and the replacement that came in was either less prepared because they hadn't had a full camp, or they just weren't as good of a fighter.
Yeah.
And so I was like, well, it's not like, I kind of knew that PFL was not going to win those fights.
Right.
The co-main event was an unbelievable fight. Impa Kasunganai, Johnny Eblen. I thought Impa won. I thought he won round 1 and round 2. He got beaten round 3, but I think he should have won the decision. And that would have been the biggest win of his career, because Eblen, the Bellator champ, is undefeated in his career and is considered by a lot of people to be the best middleweight in the world. Like, I think if you put him in the UFC right now, he beats the UFC's middleweight champ and probably the top 3 contenders in the UFC as well. And I felt like our guy beat him. So that one kind of sucked. But now we know who Francis Ngannou will be fighting when he comes back to MMA, because our PFL champion, Reina Ferreira, who's 6'8", cuts to 265, is just a freak. Was
he the guy that won early in the first round?
Yeah, he won. He landed one right hand and then just, kind of pounded it out. It was 30 seconds into the fight.
That wasn't you yelling though afterwards. It was one of your.
I was yelling. I don't know if the yelling that you're alluding to was me, but
I was trying to listen to the when it happened. I saw the Twitter and I was like, I don't think that's Sean's voice though.
It's hard to tell.
Maybe it was a Cam Cleveland. It was a Cam Cleveland episode.
Stomping on the broadcast.
A joke for 4 people. Tony Romo on the Jim Nance final touchdown in the Super Bowl. It's like he couldn't wait 4 seconds without being like, "Well, Jim, I'm like, just Tony, shh." I saw Chiefs' Twitter account put out a video of the final call, but took out Tony Romo's voice. It was much better. Not that Romo was bad but like just let it hang out. When's your next big event?
I go to Paris next week. So
God, I got to get on this PFL thing, man. I mean, you all go to Paris, Saudi Arabia. Do you need another? I saw you upgraded the ring person. Do you need me to do that next year? Can I do that?
You would actually be awesome at that.
I would. That'd be great. Yeah. Last thing on this, I like the new little ring belt combo that y'all got going. It's a little bit of like some Thanos action there, where you put the ring into the belt.
Yeah.
So all 6 fights got one ring and belt?
No, because only 4 were actual champion versus champion, either a former champion versus a current champion or vice versa, whatever. So the belt was only contested in 4 of those 6 fights. And but they're beautiful belts, man. Like, and really cool. The ring, for people who didn't see, it's a championship ring, a Super Bowl ring kind of thing, and there's a space in the front of the belt where it clips in there. So, really, really cool. I want one. I want one bad. Like, I would come back and fight if I thought I could beat any of these guys, so I could get one.
Yeah.
I'll see if I can get you one.
You can't even give me a Utah Rose Bowl sweatshirt, so we're still working on that. Still working on that first.
I actually have some Utah gear for you in my car that I just haven't shipped yet.
Dude, I'm in. I mean, I don't wear a lot of red, but I like Utah, and they've always been very kind to us on our show. Kyle's always been great, even though I did unfortunately break the news of Cam Rising's knee injury last season at media day. So that was very like ogreish of me to do such a thing.
Yeah, terrible.
So, all right, buddy. I think we hammered it out. We'll be back. I don't know. What do you want to do again?
I don't know. Next Monday.
Okay, sounds good. Next Monday.
Everybody watch the combine. Tell us, tweet at us, and tell us who your favorite prospect is, who you want your team to draft. Football guys! Later.